You can take these handkerchiefs from years ago. They don't make a lot anymore that are fancy looking, and you can make them into a quilt. I found a pattern on, I think it was ePatterns. I don't remember if it was .com or dash something or other, but I found a pattern called Mother's Handkerchiefs. And it was a digital pattern that you get right away when you paid for it. And I don't remember what I paid for it. It couldn't have been more than $10, I don't think. So what I'm showing you here is all the leftover handkerchiefs that I have. I have made 3 quilts, 3 mother's handkerchief quilts. Now, I did not have any handkerchiefs from my mother, but I recall her using them when I was a child. She always had one with her. And when I found this pattern and decided I wanted to make a quilt like they showed, I just thought it was the most beautiful thing, and I went to find handkerchiefs. Well, I couldn't find any at today's stores, really. So what I started doing was going to thrift stores and to antique shops to find my handkerchiefs. Now, I paid a variety of different prices for the handkerchiefs that I bought, and I do not recall what they were. They could have been anywhere from a dime to a quarter to, I don't know, I almost think I bought a small package that was vintage, that was, everything was still in the package and it had 5 of them in there or something like that. So that might have been $8.99, but like I said, I don't really recall the price. So soon I became known as the hanky lady when I went in to find material that I thought would go good with a variety of handkerchiefs. And I was not going to use all the same ones. That would have been really difficult to try to find all the same ones. And I did see repeats in certain particular handkerchiefs and colors. So I tried to find, I would get more than one of the same design if it was in a different color, but I wouldn't obviously put them side by side. And so I went into a fabric store that actually is no longer in the next town over from me. And the women were talking about how, these handkerchiefs are vintage, and quilts back then used kind of lighter fabrics. So I found a couple of light fabrics that had a slight design to them, but I didn't want the fabric I was going to be putting them on to be the focal point. I wanted the handkerchief to be the focal point. So, excuse me, I found my material, and I wasn't sure how much I was going to need, so I think I bought quite a bit. But I ended up making 2 handkerchiefs with the same fabric for mounting the handkerchiefs on, along with the binding and any material in between handkerchiefs. So the ladies were very, very helpful. I had no idea what size I was going to make my squares because I had handkerchiefs that were, as you can see, we've found some really little ones, like this one coming up right here. That yellow one is just a really small one, and you'll see the difference. So I decided that I wanted to make sure I got the pattern of the handkerchief into what they had you construct. meaning they had you fold the handkerchief into a butterfly shape, is what it looked like to me. So, and there's a certain way to fold it. I will put up a little video of that as well. I never thought to do that beforehand. But I do have a picture or a video at the end of this that will show the quilt that I made. And I didn't film the other one. It does have different, obviously, handkerchiefs. I actually think I love them both. And the third one I made it for my sister-in-law, and that just turned out fabulous. And she actually did have handkerchiefs from her mother. And if there weren't enough to make the full quilt with what I had on hand, then I would just, again, go to antique shops and thrift stores to try to find some. So I began my project. The first thing you do is you fold the handkerchief the way you're instructed from the pattern and press it. And I kind of did that part of it and just was looking at the various sizes that they would make for butterflies. So I decided to, I believe I made, it was either 14 or 15 inch squares. And I am one that doesn't really like a quilt top like they normally are. I like bedspreads, so I made it big. So I have a queen bed and it hangs down to the to below or to the wood where the box spring sits on the frame on both sides, which is what I wanted. And with plenty left over for the end and to tuck your pillows in. I also made pillow shams. So coming up here is the beginning of the quilt. We just have a few more of these. And I showed you on here, I pointed to a couple things where some of them had spots that were left over. It was just kind of interesting to, here it is laid out in my media room downstairs. But this butterfly, that's butterflies, little tiny pastel butterflies that I used for the border. And then that purple is actually a color that was used back in the 30s, I think they said. So here is the first one. As you can see, I've sewn that on to a piece, and I alternated kind of a beige and then a yellow that has a bit of a design to it, but not too much. And once I did that, I then satin stitched the head of the butterfly and the tentacles, or the antenna tentacles, I'm thinking alien. The antennae I did with a stem stitch, I believe it's called. And some of the handkerchiefs I left a little bit, like that one previous had a little crocheted edging to it, which, am I going to show you that? Yeah. See that little edging? I kind of left that rather than sewing it down because I thought, oh, there's a little bit of texture, a little different visualization to it. So, excuse me, every now and then I would do that on different ones, but you kind of have to be careful that you don't leave too much, kind of like this one here. That lace I did not stitch down, and that's okay. But there are places on some of the other handkerchiefs that when it was quilted, and quilted means all of the designed stitchings that you see, all over here, like the design of the quilting on top of my quilt had dragonflies in it. I'm kind of trying to show you another edging. You can see where it was folded, and you can see the back side of the handkerchief, because these handkerchiefs were so see-through, some of them, just very, very wafer thin. And I don't know if that was the fabric that was used back then or whether it was because they're, who knows, 50 plus years old. But I found that going through this made me wonder, as I was doing my sewing, who had this in their hand and where were they going that they took this beautiful handkerchief with them. And a lot of the stitching on the sculpted edge right there that you saw, I kind of just turned my wheel on the sewing machine by hand so I could go slowly and turn the corners for all that. So it was very time consuming in that respect, but worth it. And this was one that's rather see-through, so you can kind of see the pattern from the back. And again, another one that had a crocheted edge, which I left. I think if I did it again, I think I would stitch it down. For one thing, when you take your article in to have it cleaned, I don't know how dry cleaning process goes, so I don't fully understand, but you kind of don't want to have things that can come off or get ripped. And as well as when the quilting is being done, because the woman said, I'll try to be really careful, but some edges of the handkerchief or whatever it's edged in may get stuck into the quilting process. And it's like, well, I appreciate whatever you do. I know I can't do this, so I'm going to trust your expertise. So anyway, but I was just amazed at the beauty of the handkerchiefs, the satin stitching and the detail, like that had a letter N. I had another one on here that has the letter H. Some of the ones on the other quilt, I think it said Paris or something like that. So, and I was able, that's a butterfly crocheted into the corner of that handkerchief. Isn't that just wonderful? I was able to find handkerchiefs that had butterflies in them because that's what this shape makes me think of. So it was fun to incorporate a butterfly on a handkerchief into this butterfly mother's handkerchief quilt. My sister-in-law thought they looked like angels. And it was like, to her, because I was making her the quilt with her mother's handkerchiefs, and she had passed away a few years ago. So to her, it meant angels. And I just think everybody can have their own interpretation to what it means to them. But I really had a lot of fun doing this. I enjoyed sewing them. I sewed all of the satin stitch little heads, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't have the same size. I'm showing where you can see where the back part where it was folded in diagonal in half. Different sized heads, like that's a little teeny orange head, and making sure the antennae goes a different way and doesn't always curl the same way or be the same length, because every handkerchief is different, every butterfly is different. So, but some of them are so intricate and just absolutely beautiful. And that's okay, I'm just pointing that out. I decided I did not want to cut these in the shape of the triangle. I wanted to leave them whole. If for some reason in the future, if this quilt gets out of my hands and my kids' hands, if any of them want these, that someone may want to take this old half-rotten quilt, in who knows 100 years, and use the handkerchiefs, and they might be able to do that just by removing the stitching by hand. So, and then they would have the whole handkerchief that they could make however they wanted. If they wanted to use it, they could. I was showing you right there that gold one where the little scallop got caught in the top quilting. But I really didn't have a particular way that I wanted to lay them. You could lay them anyway. You could, you know, have them, all mine are going in the same direction, which after I kind of did the thing, I thought, would have been nice if I'd altered them, you know, like one way, one the next, and do that again. Left and then right. So, and this is a round handkerchief, so it was a little harder to try to manipulate it. You can't see real well the back end of the butterfly on like you can on the rest, that there's kind of a point it comes down to right there on that round one, but I was going to make it work because it was such a unique handkerchief. I don't know that I'd ever seen, if it wasn't round, it was oval. So it just didn't kind of come out like the rest of them did. But I thought that's okay. I was still pleased with how I was able to make it work. And some of these were so big, they almost went to the edge of the square of that I was sewing them onto, and that was fine. And that's why I decided to make large large squares. So what I am doing now is folding it in half. So you can see the back of the fabric for the backing. And this is just a very pretty, and they didn't have enough that I could use all that beautiful muted colors that went with what was on the front. They did not have enough of that, so I had to find another color that would coordinate and put it on the sides, on both long sides. So now I'm turning the corner over because I have a little thing. I made that August 30th, 2014. That was my 7th quilt that I had made. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please let me know if you did. Thanks again. Sincerely, Susan.